My husband looked me in the eyes the morning he left and said, "I don't know what I would do without you." I squeezed his hand and told him I'd be right here waiting. What he didn't know was that I had already signed the divorce papers 3 days before. But let me take you back. Because this story isn't what you think it is. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about the moment I finally stopped lying to myself. My name is Layla. I'm 35 years old. And for 7 years, I was the kind of wife who ironed his shirts without being asked, remembered the names of every one of his colleagues, and convinced herself that a man who provided well was a man who was present. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things, but I was never wrong about what I saw. I grew up in a small town outside of Nashville, the oldest of 3 sisters, raised by a mother who worked double shifts at a diner and still had dinner on the table by 7. She taught me to be steady. She taught me to be grateful. She never taught me what to do when the person you built your whole life with turns out to be a stranger wearing a familiar face. I met Daniel when I was 27. He was charming in that quiet, understated way that feels more trustworthy than loud confidence. He was a civil engineer, methodical and dependable, and I thought I had found someone who matched my energy. We dated for almost 2 years, got married on a warm Saturday in May, and moved into a house in a suburb just outside of Charlotte. I was a physical therapist at a rehabilitation center nearby. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. Or at least, I thought it was. For the first few years, I have nothing bad to say. We laughed a lot. We had routines that felt like comfort. We talked about eventually starting a family in the way people do when they're happy and not quite ready, always someday, always soon. Daniel worked hard. I worked hard. We saved together, planned together, and I honestly believe we were building something that would last. Then the small things started. Not dramatic, not obvious, just small enough that each one alone meant nothing. He started sleeping with his phone face down on the nightstand. He began leaving for work 20 minutes earlier than he used to. He came home still talking on a call he had to finish before coming inside, and when I asked who it was, he always had an easy, unremarkable answer. Stress at work, a new project, a contractor issue. I believed every single one of those answers because I wanted to. The moment I stopped being able to pretend was a Thursday night in autumn. I had come home from a long shift to find Daniel standing in the backyard on a phone call. I could see him through the kitchen window. He didn't know I was home yet. And he was laughing, genuinely, fully, the way I hadn't heard him laugh with me in over a year. By the time I opened the back door, the call was over. He smiled and kissed me on the cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. I said I wasn't hungry. Something in my chest had gone very quiet. I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I started paying attention the way I should have months earlier. I noticed that his gym visits had become longer and more frequent, yet he didn't seem to be sleeping better or losing weight or gaining any of the energy that exercise tends to give people. I noticed he had opened what he called a personal investment account, something he mentioned once and never brought up again. I noticed that when his firm announced a major new project in Atlanta, one that would require him to be on site for 14 months, he came home with a rehearsed explanation ready before I had even asked a single question. Atlanta, he said, was a career-defining opportunity. The relocation package was more than generous. My own clinic had been talking about promoting me to senior therapist, a position I had been working toward for nearly 3 years, and he said it would be a shame to walk away from that. He said all the right things. He said them in the right order. And I sat across from him at our kitchen table and I listened and I nodded and something behind my eyes went very, very still. That night, I called my younger sister, Rena. She's an accountant and the most clear-headed person I have ever known. I told her everything, not the accusations, just the facts, the account, the behavior, the laugh through the kitchen window. She asked me one question. Layla, do you know what's in your joint accounts right now? I told her I thought so. She told me to find out for certain. What we found over the following week was a pattern I couldn't unfind. Over the course of 16 months, Daniel had been moving money from our joint savings account into a separate personal account in increments small enough to avoid any automatic alert. A few hundred here, a few thousand there. When Rena added it all up, the total came to just over $47,000. Our joint savings held just under $290,000, a number that included $80,000 from my grandmother's estate that had been left to me specifically, documented in her will, transferred into the account in my name before we ever merged our finances. I sat with that number for 2 days. Then I made an appointment with a family law attorney named Miriam, a woman who had the energy of someone who had heard every version of the story and had never once been caught off guard by any of it. She explained my situation with the kind of calm efficiency that I needed more than sympathy in that moment. The inheritance was traceable and separable. The rest of the assets would depend on documentation. She asked if I had records of my financial contributions over the years. I told her I had kept every pay stub, every deposit receipt, every statement, uploaded to a private cloud folder I maintained on my own. Something I had done out of habit, not suspicion. My mother always said, "Keep your paperwork." I had never understood that advice more clearly than I did sitting in Miriam's office. She walked me through exactly what I could and could not do. I drove from her office to a credit union I had never used before, one that had no connection to any account Daniel could access, and I opened a new account in my name alone. I moved my direct deposit. I began documenting everything with dates and details, not to punish him, but to protect what was already mine. I want to be honest about those weeks, because I think people imagine this kind of quiet preparation as something cold or calculated. It wasn't. There were nights I sat in the bathroom with the door locked and cried so hard my chest hurt. Not because I had lost him, but because I had lost the version of my life I had believed in. I cried for the woman I had been at 27, standing at that altar, meaning every word. She deserved better than this. I was doing what I was doing for her. 2 weeks before Daniel's scheduled departure, I had my confirmation. A woman named Joanna, who worked in AR at Daniel's firm, ran into me at a coffee shop we both frequented. She was friendly, uncomfortable in a way I recognized, and then she said something that answered the question I had never let myself ask out loud. She mentioned that she had seen Daniel in Atlanta back in February. During what he had told me was a conference in Raleigh, she said she assumed I knew. I told her it was fine. I finished my coffee and I called Miriam from the parking lot. The 10 days before he left were the strangest of my life. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner and asked about his packing and listened to him talk about the project timeline and said things that were completely true without being complete. I was steady, I was warm, I was already gone. 4 days before his flight, with Miriam's guidance and within everything I was legally entitled to do, I transferred the full joint savings balance into my new account. I filed a change to my direct deposit. Miriam submitted the divorce petition. Daniel did not know any of it. The morning he left, I drove him to the airport. He hugged me longer than I expected at the departure's curb, the kind of hug that might have broken me at a different time. I held on just as long. I meant that too. Grief and clarity can exist in the same moment. I have learned that. He called when he landed. I asked how the flight was. He said long. I told him to drink enough water. We said goodnight like nothing had changed, because as far as he knew, nothing had. 3 days later, when he discovered what I had done, he called in a way that was not a conversation. I let him say everything he needed to say. Then I told him calmly that his attorney could reach out to Miriam, that the documentation was thorough, and that I hoped the project went well. I meant that too, in the way you can mean something simple for someone you are done with. The divorce took 9 months. His attorney was aggressive about the savings transfer. Miriam was better. My inheritance came back to me in full, documented, and undeniable. The joint assets were divided fairly. I walked away with what I had walked in with, plus everything I had built since. I accepted the senior therapist promotion 6 weeks after he left. I have been building something with that title ever since. If you are watching this from that quiet place where you know something is wrong, but you keep choosing not to look directly at it, I see you. I lived in that place for a long time. And I want to tell you something that nobody told me. Looking clearly at the truth is not the same as giving up. It is not failure. It is not betrayal of the love you had. It is the most necessary, most courageous thing you can do for yourself. Know your finances, not because you should be afraid of your partner, but because that knowledge is yours by right. Know what accounts exist. Know what is in them. Know what you contributed. My sister helped me understand my own financial picture in less than a week. That understanding changed the entire outcome of my life. Keep your records, know your numbers. Trust what you see. I am not the woman who stood at that departure's curb and held on a moment longer than she planned to. I am also, somewhere in here, still her. I have made peace with both of those things. My life now is quieter than I imagined it would be, and so much lighter than it was. I work hours I chose. I have dinner with Rena every Sunday. I sleep without that low, constant tension I had carried so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. I am building something that belongs entirely to me, and I find more and more each day that I am very, very good at it.